So I wanted to talk with you a little bit about this, some of the Psalms, and particularly the so-called royal Psalms, which, of which there's a bunch in the Psalter. But in order to really appreciate them in their historical and cultural context, we need to kind of back up a little bit and figure out how Israel became royal. They were under, they weren't kings. The understanding when Israel first moved into the Promised Land was that God was going to be their king. And you have to understand what a king is in particular, because we think of a king is this more or less very nice but inconsequential person who doesn't actually rule. The prime minister rules, parliament rules, the king is there to open hospitals and shopping malls and whatever. So I guess it doesn't God love him, doesn't actually do anything. But in the ancient days, the king went out at the head of the armies. He was the one who provided security within the land. He's the one who provided justice within the land. It was understood that if you were getting ripped off and run over by somebody, you could appeal to the king, kind of like appealing to Caesar a little bit, and the king would hear your case and give you justice. So the king provided security and justice within the land, and he defended the land from external attack. You kind of needed a king. It was through the king that the gods or God protected and provided for his people. That's why the king was often thought of as the adopted son of the God. I said, "You are God's." You're my son today. I have begotten you in Psalm 2. That's the normal Middle Eastern language for talking about the king being the adopted son of the deity. The deity would protect the king as a father protects his son. Israel didn't have a king. Israel had God himself as their king. God was the one that protected them. But there was a catch. God would protect Israel, as it said in the Mosaic Covenant, and provide for them if they obeyed him, if they would cling to him and worship him only, and kept his Torah, which is to say had essential justice and compassion within the land. But if they broke his Torah, if they ground the face of the poor, if they went aside and turned and worshipped other gods and things like that, God would not only not protect them, he would make sure that they were judged and essentially destroyed. So in the book of Deuteronomy, which is the so-called second giving of the law, there is all of these stipulations, the basic stipulations, then there were detailed stipulations, and then there were blessings that would accrue to them if they kept the covenant or the treaty, and curses that would befall to them if they broke the covenant and the treaty. So it was understood that when God brought Israel into the land under Joshua, that Joshua did not conquer the land. They talk about the conquest under Joshua. There was no conquest. In Joshua, there was never an understanding that Joshua would conquer the whole of Canaan and settle everybody in there. That's not what the book of Joshua says, and was not, in fact, what actually happened. Joshua had the people cross the River Jordan, planted in a place called Gilgal, just not far from the River Jordan, and from that base camp, Israel went out on a series of disabling raids. They would go to the various, starting with Jericho, and then Ai, and then Hazor, a little big city in the north. They would have these disabling raids to essentially break the back of the opposition, and then it was understood in the following days and generations, the Israel tribes themselves would say, this is our allotted land, this is the territory that God has given us, we will wage war against the people there and drive them out. Not annihilate them, there's no genocide, we will drive them out, go someplace else. Go to Syria, get on the boat to America, do whatever you're going to do, but get out of here. So whether they would have success in doing that depended upon whether or not they were obedient to God. And of course the book of, long introduction to the royal Psalms. So the book of Judges records how much success they had and how much success they did not have. Because of course they would, the understanding was that they would be oppressed by their neighbors. They would be oppressed by the original inhabitants of the land. And then when they cried to God and say, we repent, we're sorry we were so stupid, we are sorry we were so unjust, we are sorry we were so idolatrous, we repent, please help us, then God would raise up a judge to fight back and establish justice for them, hence the bit about the judges, and then they would be able to conquer the people, drive them out, and stay in their own land. So the concept of judges Don't think of the judge on the bench, the old Perry Mason lawyer thing like this. The judge with a little gavel, you're out of order, counselor. No. A judge was essentially a freedom fighter. The Canaanites were thought of them as terrorists, perhaps, but the point is they were people who would gather an ad hoc militia, because there was no standing army, and would fight back against the oppressors. There's one story of a judge by the name of Ehud. Your little map. Can you see? No, you can't see this. You can only hear this, right?
Yes,
You can see. Okay, so there's this little air map of Palestine, and then here's Palestine, and then the Moabites are in the south, the southeast, and they were being oppressed by Eglon, king of the Moabites, for a long time until God raised up Ehud. And so Ehud was a judge, which is to say he was someone who came to bring justice and vindication to the people down here. And all of the judges, by the way, were kind of local. You had Ehud down here, and you had Deborah up there on the northwest. You had Samson eventually on the southwest, dealing with the Philistines. So they weren't sequential. You didn't have one judge and then another and then another. No, they were kind of overlapping. So Ehud went in there, and he had wanted to see Eglon. Eglon was the king of the Moabites, and he was rather rotund, actually quite fat. And so Ehud was a left-handed man, and he went in there, and it was the normal time to bring in tribute to Eglon, normally kind of agricultural stuff, which is to say they were taxed to death by the Moabites, that they needed freedom from that oppression. So Ehud fashioned himself a short little sword without a hilt, probably about 18 inches long, and put it on his right hip. So he went, and of course your clothing falls over your right hip. And it was understood that if you're armed, you have a sword, and of course you got to carry it on your left hip because you're right-handed. Ehud, however, was not right-handed; he was left-handed. He had a little short sword, put it on his right hip, with, like I say, with the clothing folding over it and concealing it. And so he was allowed into the king armed because they thought that he was not armed. You look on the guy's left hip, there's nothing there, so what's he going to do? So Ehud goes in there and says to the king, "I have a message from God for you, king." And he says, so he has all the people go out. This is a private message from God. No doubt Eglon considered it to be, your God has told me that I should build a temple or that I should do something like this. So he stood up to receive the oracle, in the same way as we stand up to receive the oracles of God at the Orthodox Church, which is to say we stand for the gospel. So he stood up, and then Ehud, the left-handed man, took out his short dagger, plunged it into his belly, all the way in. Didn't withdraw it. The fat closes over the thing, and with the scripture's usual economy words, it says, "And the dirt fell out." Nice. And so he falls down there, dead and dying. Ehud locks the doors, takes off, and gathers the army. Meanwhile, the people of the Moabites are waiting for the king to come out, and they're thinking, he's been in the bathroom a long time. And then eventually they say, "Okay, open the door, break down the door." And they break down the door and find that he's dead. Of course, by then the army has gathered, and they took the fords of the Jordan and kind of pushed them back. So that was what the judges did. It was not an old man in a black robe with a little powdered wig on his head. It was a young man who had a sword and gathered an army. So it was understood that if Israel would obey God, God would give them victory through the judges when they needed victory through the judges. But there was no standing army. So and that was a problem for many of the people there, because they wanted a standing army. And the difference between a king, traditional king such as the nations had, and the king of the Moabites or something like this, there was that, or the local kings of Israel prior to Saul, was that the kings of the nations were dynastic. The king died, the son takes over, or somebody from the family takes over. So there was always a king, and therefore always a standing army. And the people of Israel said, "We want a king with a standing army. We want to be like all of the other nations." And Samuel, the prophet, said, "You don't need a standing army. You just need God. God will give you the victory. God is our king." They said, "Nope, we want a king like all of the others." Okay then, so Samuel warned them what was going to happen with the king, namely political corruption and all that sort of thing that happens. The king will take your best fields and give it to his favorite people there. He'll tax the heck out of you. They said, no, we still want to do it. So okay, so then God chose Saul by lot, and Saul was the dynastic king, and he camped at a place called Gibeah with his the royal family essentially, and his army, which as we would say, a small militia. Okay, so Saul does many wonderful things for Israel that you expect a king to do, but there was one time when, despite the fact that Saul had been, this is the long lead in to the Psalter, so you haven't missed it yet. Talking about King Saul and the institution of the monarchy. Before there were no kings, there was just judges whom God, the true king, would raise up, and then Saul is brought in. And then Saul, however, disobeys God. And if you're reading in your Bibles, I am in 1 Samuel 15. Sad bit of the Bible. This is, we will recall that Saul had been anointed prophetically by Samuel to be king, even before he was chosen, and then he was chosen by lot. So, and then Samuel said to Saul, Yahweh sent me to anoint you as king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore listen to the words of Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he set himself against him on the way while he was coming up out of Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and utterly destroy them, all that he has. Do not spare him, but put to death both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. Then Saul summoned the people and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men of Judah. Probably rather a lesser number, but this is something. The word thousand, aleph in the Hebrew, can mean 1,000, like more than 999 and less than 1,001. It can also mean a military unit. It can mean a military commander. So it's a fairly elastic word. But anyway, he numbers his men, and Saul went to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in the valley. Saul said to the Kenites, depart, go down from among the Amalekites, so that I not destroy with them, for you showed kindness to the sons of Israel when they came up from Egypt. The word kindness is the word chesed in the Hebrew, meaning essentially covenant loyalty. So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites, and so Saul defeated the Amalekites, literally smote the Amalekites, from Havilah as you go to Shur, which is east of Egypt. He captured Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, but utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and all that was good, and were not willing to destroy them utterly, but everything despised and worthless, that they utterly destroyed. So you got to know what's happening a little bit. The Amalekites were essentially, as I once described them, Nazis on camels, not nice people. When Israel came out of Egypt, for no particular reason, they made raids against them and slaughtered the stragglers, which is to say the elderly, the women, the children. And so Moses decided under the providence of God, this would be Israel's proto-foe. This was the ancestral, there will be a blood feud between Israel and Amalek, essentially saying, you'll get yours. Okay, so the Amalekites were not good people, and so now was the time for the settling of scores. Now was the time for vengeance. This is foreign to our modern North American understandings of justice, but in the Semitic tribes back then, you had a blood feud. It was understood that if I'm from the clan Farley and you kill me, my surviving clan will come and take out your guys, maybe a lot of your guys. And it might take them a while, might take them 10 years, might take them 3 generations, but they will have vengeance on them. So that was meant to be a break on killing the defenseless person. I could walk any place, and you can understand that you can't kill me because I got my guys behind me, and you have your guys behind you. So we will live and let live, because this was meant to be a deterrent to this sort of thing. So blood feud was the way that justice and protection worked back then. So either individually or in fact nationally. And so, and what they were told is to put them under the harem. Uh, they, how hard to translate words. So sometimes it's translated destroy them utterly. Sometimes it's translated dedicate them. Sometimes it's to put them under the ban. Something that was put under the ban of harem, or whatever you want to translate it, was taken out of normal human usage. So, for example, there was one pagan king who put a field under the ban and said, "This field now belongs to God. Nobody can use it. You can't graze your animals on it. It belongs to God." If you put, if you go into a city and you put all of its stuff under ban, it all belongs to God. The gold and the silver and the stuff and the pretty garments, all of the wealth can't be used by men. You can't take it as plunder. That belongs to the divine treasury. That belongs to the shrine or the temple or whatever. You can't grab it. If you blot them out, including their national identity, which is, of course, mostly borne by the king. So all of the men and the women that you kill, you can't take the animals as plunder, because usually if you were a soldier, it was like, why do you want to be a soldier? You want to be a soldier because when you win, you get plunder. We win the battle, and a share of the sheep and the oxen and the gold and the silver and the male slaves and the female slaves, that's all mine, because that was my lawful plunder. That's why people wanted to be soldiers. Wasn't so much patriotism, it's how much you got from it. You weren't paid a salary, that was your salary. So people did not like to do holy war, because if you went into holy war and put them under the ban, you get no plunder. You get no stuff. So Saul goes in there, and he was told to put the Amalekites under the ban, dedicating all that they had to God, which is everything that breathes is destroyed. The gold and the silver belongs to the temple. The king, this is the first one gone, because they blotting out the name of Amalek from under heaven means that their national identity is gone. The modern equivalent would be when the Allies defeated Germany in the Second World War. There's a denazification. There used to be Nazi Germany, now it's just Germany. The idea the Nazi identity has been eradicated, and hence all of those. So that's a semi-modern equivalent for all of that. So that was the charge he was supposed to do as the king, and he didn't do it. He kept the animals, the good animals, and he kept the king alive. So in verse 10, the word of Yahweh came to Samuel, saying, "I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me and has not carried out my commandments." And Saul was distressed and cried to Yahweh all night. And Samuel rose early in the morning to meet Saul. And it was told Samuel, saying, "Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he set up a monument for himself. Then he turned and proceeded down to Gilgal." Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed are you of Yahweh. I have carried out Yahweh's command." But Samuel said, "What then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears, and the lowing of oxen which I hear?" Saul said, They have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and oxen to sacrifice to Yahweh your God, but the rest they had put under the ban. And Samuel said to Saul, "Wait, let me tell you what Yahweh said to me last night." He said to him, "Speak." And Samuel said, "Is it not true, though you were little in your own eyes, you were made head over the tribes of Israel? Yahweh anointed you king over Israel, and Yahweh sent you on a mission and said, 'Go and put under the ban the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are exterminated.' Why then did you not obey Yahweh's voice, but rushed upon the spoil and did what was evil in Yahweh's sight?" Then Saul said to Samuel, quite remarkable, "I did obey the voice of Yahweh, and went on the mission on which Yahweh sent me, and brought back Agag, the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took some of the spoil, sheep and oxen, the choicest of things devoted to destruction, or which they put under the ban, to sacrifice to Yahweh your God in Gilgal." And Samuel said, "Has Yahweh as much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying Yahweh's voice? Behold, to obey is better than to sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and insubordination is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected Yahweh's word, he has rejected you from being king." It goes on, but that's the deal. So Saul was the anointed king. He was chosen king. He was set up, and it was understood that he would be king, and the house of Saul would rule over Israel. when Saul died, Jonathan would take over, and when Jonathan died, little grandson would take over, or somebody else would take over. But Saul, they would be at the dynasty of Saul going back over there. And now God is saying, I changed my mind. I regret that I made Saul king. I have chosen somebody else, somebody who's better than you. It was, of course, David. So that's the background for 2 Samuel 7, if you would jump ahead. Quite far ahead, actually. You will recall David was chosen by Samuel and anointed to be Saul's successor. You will recall that he was Saul's general, slaying Goliath and doing all of that stuff, and that he was a successful general and was very, very popular. And Saul, who was always a little bit insecure, that's why he was hanging out among the baggage instead when they were dropping casting the lots. Saul was quite paranoid that he was becoming too popular and would take over, rebel against him, kill him, slaughter all of the house of Saul, and be king in his place. Despite the fact that, as 2 Samuel makes abundantly clear, and 1 Samuel, David was spectacularly loyal to Saul. But nonetheless, Saul was out to destroy him, and David had to flee from Saul into the wilderness, even try to take refuge among the Philistines, of all people, because that's what he had to do. And so eventually David was established as, first he was acknowledged by his own tribe of Judah, the obvious choice for recognizing him, and then eventually there was continual war between the house of David and the house of Saul. Eventually everybody in the house of Saul could see the handwriting on the wall, and they realized, okay, well, we're going to make David king over all of the tribes of Israel. So he was. And then David brought the ark to Jerusalem. It was in the field, and he had a plan to make a house of cedar. It was understood that all of the gods in the world, in the Middle East, had temples. They were nice temples of stone, fancy places of cedar, which was really good wood you could get from Lebanon. And so he thought, whereas Yahweh's living in a tent, our God is the true God. Our God is the best God. He's the most mighty God, and he's dwelling in a tent. They would set up, of course, they would have the ark, but there'd be a tent around that, and another tent around that, and then the open courtyard. It was the same sort of thing that they had since they came out of Egypt, a very portable shrine, because you have to pack it up and take it some other places. So it was fairly culturally and technologically and architecturally primitive. And this is, the true God surely should have a beautiful temple like all of the gods of the nations. Also he's saying, if I'm going to be a player among the kings of the nations, I've got to have a palace, and my God's got to have a nice temple. So 2 Samuel 7. This is heading into the Psalms, I promise. I'm going to get there. I have to set the scene. Now it came about when the king, that's David, lived in his house, yet Yahweh had given him rest on every side from all his enemies, that the king said to Nathan the prophet, "See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells within tent curtains." And Nathan said to the king, "Go, do all that is in your mind, for Yahweh is with you." But the same night the word of Yahweh came to Nathan and said, "Go and say to my servant David, thus says Yahweh, are you the one who should build me a house to dwell in? For I have not dwelt in a house since the day I brought up the sons of Israel from Egypt, even to this day. But I have been moving about in a tent, even in a tabernacle, a mishkan, a temporary shelter. Wherever I have gone with all the sons of Israel, did I speak a word to one of the tribes of Israel, which I commanded you to shepherd my people Israel, saying, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now therefore, thus you shall say to my servant David, thus says Yahweh of hosts, I took you from the pasture, from following sheep, to be ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and have cut off all your enemies from before you. And I will make you a great name, like the names of the great men who are on the earth. I will also appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may live in their own place and not be disturbed again, nor will the wicked afflict them any more as formerly. Even from the day that I commanded the judges to be over my people Israel, and I will give you rest from all your enemies. Yahweh also declares to you that Yahweh will make a house for you, When your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your seed after you, who will come forth from you, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build me a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me. When he commits iniquity, I will correct him with the rod of men and the strokes of the sons of men. But my loving kindness, my covenant loyalty, it's the word chesed again. My covenant loyalty shall not depart from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom shall endure before me forever. Your throne shall be established forever. In accordance with all these words and all this vision, so Nathan spoke to David. And it goes on. So it's not called a covenant, but it's a covenant. God said, because I see in you something good, I will make a covenant with you that your dynasty will continue to reign over the house of Israel forever. If your descendants mess up, I'll correct them with the strokes of men, which is to say they will lose this battle, they will lose that battle, but they will still continue to reign over Israel. It is a promise that I make. I took it away from Saul. I will never take it away from you. Okay, so that's the covenant, and so and it is on the basis of that covenant that we have the royal psalms. So, for example, there's a number of psalms in the Psalter which rejoice in the security of Israel under the Davidic king. The first one is Psalm 2. I'm going to go through 3 or 4 and ending with Psalm 89, which is kind of one of the most poignant, perplexed psalms in the entirety of the Psalter. So Psalm 2 is not historical, but it gives you this picture of an international alliance of all of the nations who are encircling Israel. Israel has sovereignty over them. They have made treaties with them. They are subordinate. They are vassals to Israel. And the alliance says, enough. We've had enough of this. We're going to throw off their yoke. We're going to break our vassal status. We are going to rebel against them. We're not going to submit to Israel and its king anymore. But God has other ideas. So, Psalm 2, it asks rhetorically, why are the nations in an uproar and the peoples devising a vain thing? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers take counsel together against Yahweh and against his anointed, that is to say, his king, saying, let us tear their fetters apart, let us cast away their cords from us. That's the international alliance determined to break their vassal status and rebel and gain their independence. But he who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. They will speak to them in his anger and terrify them in his fury, saying, as for me, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain. I will surely tell of the decree of Yahweh. He said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask me, and I will surely give you the nations for your inheritance, and the very ends of the earth as your possession. You'll break them as with a rod of iron. You'll shatter them like earthenware. So this is God's response to this international alliance. As the people are doing their spear rattling, God says to him, you're idiots, all of you. This is stupid. You can do whatever you like. I laugh at you. I laugh in your general direction, as it were. And so he's saying, it doesn't matter what you do. I scoff at your attempts, because as for me, I've installed my king from the house of David on my holy mountain. I will protect him as a man honors his son. Like I said before, one of the Middle Eastern cultural things was that the king was the adopted son of the god. So today, that's the day of adoption, which is to say the day that the king is anointed as king. When you become king, you're adopted as the son of the god. And the God has made a promise that the king need only ask, and all of the nations will be his inheritance, the very ends of the earth. You'll break them with a rod of iron, literally shepherd them with a rod of iron, and shatter them like earthenware. So, what's the upshot for this idiot alliance? Now therefore, O kings, show discernment, take warnings, judges of the earth. Worship the Lord with reverence, and rejoice with trembling. Hard to translate this exactly, but probably in the original, lay hold of instruction, that he may not become angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath may soon be kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. So this is one of the royal psalms to say this is how secure Israel is in the world. God will defend, even if there's this international alliance, this federation of rebellion, nothing's going to happen. When God exalts the king, the nation will be made secure. Any questions before I keep on trucking?
I'm curious about that, like that timeline, because that covenant that God makes with David is permanent. And then, as we read in the New Testament, the church is Israel.
We'll get there. I'll get you. I'll
connect
the dots.
I'm all right. Wait, sorry, I'm too heavy.
That's okay. You're the so if you where do there's so well let's jump into Psalm 46. There's so many, and I'm looking at the time. I gotta take my watch off in case I don't have that timer there. You can see that. Psalm 46. Again, it's one of the songs of Zion. After David moved the ark to his city, the city of David, became the city of God. Well, you will recall that the ark was essentially a portable structure. It could be in Gilgal, where it was. It could be in Shiloh, where it was. It could be more or less anywhere. But David decided at a stroke to unite Israel. It was understood that the national unity depended upon the ark. Wherever you were, 3 times a year, according to the Torah, you would come to where the ark was to offer sacrifice. Deuteronomy is real clear. You can't offer sacrifice wherever you want. You can only offer sacrifice to Yahweh where the ark is, where that Mosaic shrine is. Again, it was the salvation depended upon sacrifice. So you got to come to where God is to offer sacrifice. That's the deal. So what David decided to do is he would move the ark to his civic capital, to Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the capital where the king was. The ark could be any place, but David decided that if he moved the ark to his city, to the city of David, Jerusalem, the city of David, would not only be the civic capital, it would be the religious capital as well. Wherever you were, the whole of the 12 tribes would be united around David and his city. So after you move the ark there, and especially after Solomon more or less seals the deal by building a little temple around the thing, then the city of David, Zion, becomes the city of God. So you have a whole bunch of the Psalms reveling in the glory of Zion, Jerusalem, because in Zion, Jerusalem, that's where the temple is. That's where the ark is. God no longer dwells in Shiloh. Now God dwells in Jerusalem. So you have these Jerusalem songs, like, for example, Psalm 46. Again, these are not historical things. These are poetic things. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains slip into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains quake at its swelling pride. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy dwelling place of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She will not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations made an uproar. The kingdoms tottered. He raised his voice. The earth melted. Yahweh of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. Come, behold Yahweh's works, who has wrought desolations in the earth. He makes wars to cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariots in the fire. Cease striving and know that I am God. I'll be exalted among the nations. I'll be exalted in the earth. Yahweh of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. So you have this image about the chaos that is around there. There could be such chaos and rebellion and warfare that it's like a tremendous flood overcoming them, like an earthquake happening. Zion will not be moved because God is in the midst of her. From Zion, God will give Israel victory even to the ends of the earth, making desolations, making wars to cease. It's not talking about, oh, there's such peace. No, it's the peace that comes after you've been essentially smoked and your army annihilated. That's the peace. Once again, jumping a little bit ahead to Psalm 48. Great is Yahweh and greatly to be praised, in the city of our God, his holy mountain. Beautiful in elevation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great king. God is in her palaces. That is to say, the citadels. He has made himself known as a stronghold. For behold, the kings assembled together. They passed by together. They saw it. Then they were amazed. They were terrified. They fled in alarm. Panic seized them there, anguish as a woman in childbirth. As with the east wind, you break the ships of Tarshish. As we have heard, so we have seen. In the city of Yahweh we have hosted the city of our God. God will establish it forever. The images of all of the kings wanting to invade, even ships of Tarshish. The ships of Tarshish, or Spain essentially, modern Spain, they were beautiful, they were rich, they were ocean-going vessels, they were the best of the ships. But nonetheless, when God defends his people, even with an east wind, breaks the ships of Tarshish. All of the stuff that they had heard about God defending them, they have seen that with their own eyes. So when these invading kings merely see how fortified Zion is, they say, we're going home. You know what? We came, we saw, we ran away. You know, that was their version of this Easter thing. We have thought on the midst of your loving kindness, again, your covenant loyalty, O God, in the midst of your temple, as is your name, which is to say, your manifested power, so is your praise to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is full of righteousness. Let Mount Zion be glad. Let the daughters of Judah rejoice. The daughters are, of course, the villages around Judah, not the girls who live in the city. Let the daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments. Walk about Zion, go around her, count her towers, consider her ramparts, go through her palaces, that you tell it to the next generation. Such is our God forever. He will guide us for length of days. So you get all of these glorifications of Zion. The best one comes in Psalm 72. So again, this is a song of Solomon, and it's talking about how God will bless the Davidic king, probably at Solomon's accession. Give the king your judgments, O God, and your righteousness to the king's son. Again, your judgments, that means that God will, his verdict is that he will defend the king. When the enemies roar in, he'll put them down and destroy them. That's his judgment. You say, what's his? That's his righteousness. That's his vindication. The word righteousness sometimes means military victory in these contexts. May he judge your people with righteousness and your afflicted with justice. Let the mountains bring forth peace to the people, and the hills in righteousness. May he vindicate the afflicted of the people, save the children of the needy, and crush the oppressor. So again, that was the job of the king. As I mentioned before, you could appeal to the king for justice, and the king would give you justice. He would save the children of the needy, crush their oppressor that's trying to grind the face of the poor. Let them fear you, meaning the king, while the sun endures, as long as the moon throughout all generations. May he come down like rain upon the mown grass, like showers that water the earth. In his days may righteousness flourish, the abundance of peace until the moon is no more. Again, you got to catch the word for peace is, of course, the word shalom. It doesn't just mean, oh, it's so peaceful here. No, shalom means prosperity as well. So there was an abundance, every man sitting in security under his vine and fig tree. The good days were there. There would be that sort of peace, an abundance of peace and prosperity. As long as the moon is in the sky, you know that that's going to last. May he also rule from sea to sea, that is to say, from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, and from the river, the Euphrates, to the ends of the earth. Let the nomads of the desert bow before him, and his enemies lick the dust. Let the kings of Tarshish and of the islands bring presents. Again, faraway coastline that you can't even see beyond the horizon. Let the kings of Sheba and Seba in southern Arabia bring gifts. Let all kings bow down before him, all nations serve him. For he will deliver the needy when he cries for help, the afflicted also, and him who has no helper. He will have compassion on the poor and needy, and the lives of the needy he will save. He will rescue their life from oppression and violence, and their blood will be precious in his sight. So may he live, and may the gold of Sheba be given to him. Let them pray for him continually, let them bless him all day long. May there be an abundance of grain in the earth on the tops of the mountains, where generally you don't find an abundance of grain. Its fruit will wave like the cedars of Lebanon, which is to say, very thickly. And may those from the city flourish like vegetation of the earth. May his name endure forever. May his name increase as long as the sun shines. Let men bless themselves by him, and let all nations call him blessed. verse 18 and 19 and 20 are editorial addition from the editor of book 2. So that's where the psalm ends, actually, in verse 17. But again, you have this glorification of Zion, this glorification of the king. He will be there as long as the sun is in the sky, as long as you can get up at night and see the moon, it'll be okay. Then comes Babylon. You know the story, of course, that Israel, the northern kingdom, and Judah in the southern kingdom, both rebelled against God. They embraced injustice. They ground the face of the poor. The rich people were grabbing out all the property of the poor people, selling the poor for the price of sandals. Bad things happening, worshiping all sorts of false gods in there. The understanding, of course, was that you can worship Yahweh, and Yahweh has a consort, the Ashtaroth, Mrs. Yahweh, because all of the gods came in pairs, male and female gods, and they would breed and have little gods like that. So it was understood that Yahweh was okay. He was the God that you worshiped when we were in the wilderness. But now that we're in an agricultural place, we need an agricultural God, like Baal, for example, the rain god, the storm god, the god of fertility. You can worship Yahweh too, but Baal's really where it's at. Your prosperity comes from worshiping Baal. So that was what was expressly denied in the covenant. God said, if you abandon me, if you worship other gods as well as me, I will have you destroyed. And that was the message of the prophets. They said, if you continue to do this, you're on a course for self-destruction. You're walking over the edge of a precipice, and you don't even know it. And they rejected that message. And so, of course, what happened to the northern kingdom, the brutal Assyrian Empire, came in 722 BC and swept away the northern kingdom. And the southern kingdom of Judah, House of David, looked at it and learned essentially nothing. You were thinking, well, we don't want that to happen to us. Maybe we should not worship gods other than Yahweh. Maybe we should obey his Torah and take care of the poor and the widow and the fatherless. No. So they did not do that, and despite the warnings of Isaiah, despite the warnings of Jeremiah, despite the exilic warnings of Ezekiel, the Babylonians came in 597 BC, took away a bunch of the guys to Babylon, and instead of saying, it's going to come for the rest of us unless we get our act together, they said, no, this is a flesh wound. This is kind of it'll be over soon. They'll come back, and all the stuff that they take in from the temple, they'll come back, and it'll be business as usual. It'll be fine. And Ezekiel said, don't count on it. Unless you get it together, they will be back. And, so they set up, the Babylonians, of course, set up a puppet king upon the throne of Judah from the house of David. And then he decided that enough is enough. He's going to rebel against Babylon. And Jeremiah said, don't do that. Babylon is the sword in Yahweh's hand to judge you for your idolatry. And he said, no. We're going to depend upon Egypt. We're going to depend upon all these other alliances. So Babylon came back and besieged the city of David, and the siege was horrific. Such was the hunger in the city of David that people resorted to cannibalism. Read all about it in Lamentations if you wanted the gory details. And finally, Jerusalem fell in 586, and the king saw his sons killed before his eyes. Then he had his own eyes gouged out and was taken away in chains to Babylon, and that's it. They had a governor, a Gedaliah, placed on the throne. Israel again, the few that were left in the land learned zilch. They assassinated the governor, the governor, and they tried to hive off to Egypt. So they're faced with national extinction. The temple was burned to the ground. The king, the house of David, was gone. So that's that. So in the face of that, we have Psalm 89. This was all essentially a lead up to this cry of despair, this cry of perplexity. The psalmist saying, where are your promises? Lord, you promised. You made a solemn promise that David's and his descendants would reign over Judah forever. As long as the sun was in the sky, you said, as long as the moon is still there, you can look up and see the sun and the moon and realize that David will still be ruling over. You will not take your mercies away from David. If his sons sinned, you said that they would judge them, correct them with the strokes of men. They would lose this battle, but there would always be a king over Judah from the house of David. That's what you promised. And what has happened? Where's your promise? Where's your covenant loyalty? So in Psalm 89, the word trustworthiness or faithfulness, emunah in the Greek, comes up over and over and over again. The word covenant comes up over and over and over again. So it begins with a declaration of God's faithfulness. God's faithfulness, his emunah, his trustworthiness. He will keep the promises that he made. I will sing of the loving kindness of Yahweh forever. And again, the word loving kindness is the word chesed. To all generations I will make known your faithfulness, your emunah, with my mouth. For I have said, loving kindness will be built up forever. In the heavens you will establish your faithfulness. I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn to David my servant, I will establish your seed forever and build up your throne to all generations. So that's the promise, and then there's the recitation of God's power. God had the power to keep his word. It wasn't like, yeah, but I didn't know how big the Babylonian army would be. Sorry about that. I was going to try to defend you, but man, look at all those Babylonians. That was not it. No, rather, the heavens, verse 5, the heavens will praise your wonders, Yahweh, your faithfulness, again, your emunah, in the assembly of the holy ones, which is to say the angels. For who in the skies is comparable to Yahweh? Who among the sons of the mighty, literally the sons of the Elohim, the angels, is like Yahweh, a God greatly to be feared in the council of the holy ones, and awesome above all those who are round about him? Yahweh, God of hosts, who is like you, O mighty, literally mighty Yah? Your faithfulness also surrounds you. You swell the swelling of the sea. When its waves rise, you still them. You yourself have crushed Rahab, Egypt, like one who was slain. You scattered your enemies with your mighty arm. Again, you got to catch some of the cultural background. It was understood in those days that all of the pagan gods ruled as part of a pantheon. You might have Marduk, the god of the Babylonians, and there would be the other Babylonian gods, and they would be living in council together. One would be the head over the council, Marduk or somebody, but there was always a council of them. The idea of just the Marduk, one god ruling alone, nobody thought of that. God has an army, God has a council. He rules with the other gods, a pantheon. Of course, in Israel, there only is one God. So God's council is that of the angels. The B'nai Elohim, the sons of gods, that's the angels, because there can't be any other gods. So, and he was saying that when God rules in his council, he is greatly to be feared in the council of his holy ones. That's how powerful he is. Even the angels shudder when Yahweh enters the room, as it were. And not only in heaven above, but in the earth beneath. The heavens are yours, the earth also is yours. The world and all it contains, you founded them. The north and the south, you created them. Tabor and Hermon, shout for joy at your name. Of course, Mount Tabor in Galilee, and Mount Hermon, the big mountain, biggest mountain that you can see on the northern part of Palestine. You have a strong arm, your hand is mighty, your right hand is exalted. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Loving kindness and truth go before you. How blessed are the people who know the joyful sound, which is to say the festal shout. That's the shout of victory. When you're going into battle, shing, yeah, that's the shout. That's the festal shout. Blessed are the people who know the festal shout, the joyful sound. Yahweh, they walk in the light of your countenance. That is to say, in the favor that comes from your presence. In your name, which is to say, in your power, they rejoice all the day. For by your righteousness they are exalted. For you are the glory of their strength. And by your favor, our horn, which is to say, our king, is exalted. For our shield, our king, belongs to Yahweh, our king to the Holy One of Israel. Then it shows why the king is exalted, why the king is protected by God in verse 19. Once you spoke in a vision to your godly ones, which is to say to Samuel and Nathan, and you said, I have given help to one who is mighty. I have exalted one chosen from among the people. I have found David my servant. With my holy oil I have anointed him, with whom my hand will be established. My arm also will strengthen him. The enemy will not deceive him, or fake him out. nor the son of wickedness afflict him. But I shall crush his adversaries before him and strike those who hate him. My faithfulness, again, emunah, and my loving kindness will be with him, and in my name, which is say by my power, his horn will be exalted. I will also set his hand on the sea, and his right hand on the rivers. He will cry to me, you are my Father, my God, the crag of my salvation. I shall make him my firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth. My loving kindness I will keep for him forever, and my covenant will be confirmed with him. I will establish his descendants forever, and his throne as the days of heaven, which is to say, without end. And here come the more stipulations of the covenant. If his sons forsake my law and do not walk in my judgments, if they violate my statutes and do not keep my commandments, then I will punish their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. But I will not break off my loving kindness from him, nor deal falsely with my faithfulness. My covenant I will not violate, nor will I alter the utterance of my lips. Once I have sworn by my holiness, I will not lie to David. His descendants shall endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me. It shall be established forever like the moon, and the witness in the sky is faithful. Then comes Selah, which is kind of a musical interlude to let it all sink in. You say, okay, so as the music is playing, which is say the harp, they talk about musical instruments. The praise band. Yeah, this is not that. This is the harp that is a musical instrumentation. So they're connecting the dots while the music plays. They're saying God is faithful, and he is to his promises, and he is powerful enough to keep the promises. He is known to be fearsome to the council of angels. He is known to be powerful on the earth. The whole world belongs to him, the north and the south and all of the mighty mountains. All of these things shout his name and acknowledge his supremacy. And he has spoken in a vision and made a promise through the prophets, through Samuel and through Nathan, that he will found David and will exalt him, and he will have universal sovereignty. When it talks about I'll place his hand on the sea and his right hand on the rivers. All the land that God had promised Israel will be his. He'll cry to be my Father, my God, the rock of my salvation. Father means that his protector, because in those days that's what a father did. Not when it says my God, it doesn't mean it's my God and not Marduk is my God. No, my God means my personal protector in that particular culture. The rock of my salvation. I will make him my firstborn. The firstborn, of course, inherits all that the father has. Mm-hmm. So all that God has is inherited by David. I will make him the Elyon, the highest of the kings of the earth. One of the names for Yahweh was El Elyon, God Most High. Elyon means Most High. And he was saying that I will make him the Elyon of the kings of the earth. As God is most high over all the earth, so David, his representative on earth, will be the highest of all of the kings of the earth. And if his sons mess up, then I will judge them. They'll lose this battle, that battle. I'll correct them, but I will not take my sovereignty away from him. He will continue to rule over all of the land that I give him. And this is almost certainly written immediately after the Babylonian catastrophe. In verse 38, but you have cast off and rejected. You've been full of wrath against your anointed. You have spurned the covenant of your servant. You have profaned his crown into the dust. You have broken down his walls. You have brought his strongholds to ruin. All who pass by the way plunder him. He has become a reproach to his neighbors. You've exalted the right hand of his adversaries. You have made all his enemies rejoice. You also turned back the edge of his sword. You have not made him stand in battle. You made his splendor to cease and cast his throne to the ground. You have shortened his days of his youth. You have covered him with shame. And once again, you'll note that you would tend to think the Babylonians did that. No, Yahweh did that. He was using the Babylonians. But this is what Yahweh. So Yahweh made these promises, and he turned around and did that. So that's the cry, and there's no sense of anger at God. But in verse 46, there is perplexity. How long, Yahweh? Will you hide yourself forever? Will your wrath burn like fire, which is to say unquenchable and out of control? Remember what my span is, how fleeting and frail life is, and for what vanity you have created all the sons of men. What man can live and not see death? The word man is the word geber in the Hebrew, not just a man. That would be ish. Geber is strong man, athlete. I am a man. That's what even the strong man can live and not see death. Who can deliver his soul or his life from from the hand of Sheol, the land of the dead. Where are your firm loving kindnesses, O Lord, which you swore to David in your emunah, in your faithfulness? Remember, O Lord, the reproach of your servants, how I bear in my bosom the reproach of all the peoples, with which your enemies have reproached Yahweh, with which they have reproached the footsteps of your anointed. So the image is one of the king being disgraced and humiliated. He's helpless. All the walls are broken down. Anybody can go in there and kick him in the head, essentially. He is utterly helpless before all of the attacks of men, and the final image of his enemies reproaching his footsteps. As he goes through the world, people are jeering at him. There he goes, idiot, helpless, loser. Yahweh's anointed. And that's where it ends. The final, blessed be Yahweh forever, amen and amen, is again the editorial addition to which book 3 ends. So that's one of the what do you say to that? When God, that's the question. The answer is Jesus. I'll tell you why in a minute once we get in there. But were there any questions so far about what is? Yes.
I don't know where, but I've heard like these terms like Elohim and like El Shaddai. Can you explain what are those?
I'm sorry, I could.
Elohim and El Shaddai.
Elohim is the word, is Hebrew word for God or gods. The im is the plural ending. Significantly, one of the names for God, the main name for God is Yahweh. It comes from the Hebrew word haya, meaning to be. So I am. God is the I am, the one who is who he will be. He's not constrained or controlled or hindered by anyone. He is the great I am. Yahweh is one of the names. Elohim, which means God or gods or Godhead, is the other name. So significantly, if you say I believe in, if you're a Hebrew and Elohim is the name of God, you can't pluralize it because it's already pluralized. It's almost as if all of the gods are summed up in our God, Elohim. So that's the other word that's usually used. So in Genesis 1, for example, in the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and the earth. So it's how it's usually translated. The two words are word. Shaddai is the word for Almighty. It's used less. It's used in Psalm 91. For example, Psalm 91: He who dwells in the shelter of Elyon, the Most High, will abide in the shadow of the Shaddai. I will say to Yahweh, my refuge, my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. And goes on from that. So Elohim and Shaddai are one of the two of the names for God. Please.
Maybe this is a big question, but maybe there's a quick way of jumping into it. How can a modern post-Enlightenment mind approach why it was so tempting for the Israelites to go after other gods?
Probably for the same reason as it's tempting for us to allow ourselves to be secularized. Everybody's doing it, essentially. I mean, this was when it was what God was pushing Israel and telling Israel to do was to swim upstream. It was understood that you would worship your ancestral gods, but you could have lots of gods. You could have a personal god. You could have the national god. You have the god of your city. There's lots of gods. Like I said, there's a whole pantheon of gods. And the more gods you worship, the safer you would be, because if something happened to you bad, it was understood that one of the gods has it in for you. You have to figure out which one. You have to figure out what on earth you did. So sometimes, if you weren't sure, you would have for example, in Athens, there was an altar to the unknown god. So what they're trying to get at is, if one of you guys is upset at me and I don't know which one, I'm offering a sacrifice here. This is for you. Don't sort of stuff. So the more gods you had, the better. So Yahweh was saying, only worship me, and there is no Ashtaroth. There's no Mrs. Yahweh. There's no consort. Of course, the understanding was that if you're in Palestine, you don't need a desert god that brought you through the wilderness. You need an agricultural god like Baal or like the Ashtaroth, Mrs. Baal, that sort of stuff. You had all those things. So, and it was the easiest thing to do because and especially if you're going to they, as it says in Judges, they did not drive out the other nations that were there. And so, God told Moses, drive them out, or you'll intermarry with them and end up worshiping their gods. They didn't drive them out, and they did intermarry, and they did end up worshiping their gods. Because the whole point of the food laws was to say you can't socialize with them because you can't eat their food. Walk in there and say, I have a nice Canaanite pork chop. No, can't do that. So you can't, because it's again the food laws. Not that God is anything against pork chops, but they were meant to keep Israel separate in the midst of Canaan from all of the Canaanites. And God told them over and over again, you have to drive them out, not because they don't like them, but because they will tempt you to worship their gods. Significantly, Ruth was a Moabite woman who joined Israel, and she was the exception that proves the rule. She said, my God will be your God. Okay, well then that's a different thing. You can intermarry with her because she's essentially left her gods back in Moab. So,
I recently read an article kind of going into some of the history of this stuff, and seemed to be well sourced. But I'm curious if you've heard of things that some of these gods, in worshiping them, there was a lot of, keep the PG version, a lot of sexual immorality in terms of worshiping.
Yeah, there was
and that was
yeah.
And so in and of that, on a very carnal level, it was a huge temptation.
Yeah, I mean there was because the rain gods, the storm gods were essentially gods of fertility. They understand that the gods were in many ways projections of the forces of nature, like fertility. That's the whole point of the golden calf. So it was golden, is that it was a bull calf, an image of fertility. And so some of the gods were seen astriding the bull, the forces of fertility. So in some places, what you would do is you would have what was called a cult prostitute. They came in both genders, isn't that nice? But the understanding was that if you wanted to ensure the fertility of your fields, you would go to the cult center, offer a sacrifice to the fertility god, and have sex with the cult prostitute. That was the way of joining with the god and ensuring that God would make, through this sexual act, that would bring fertility to your fields. That was the thought. In fact, the word for holy is in that language is from the same root for the word for cult prostitute. It's the word because it was understood that it wasn't about, hi there, sailor. That wasn't about it. It was a religious thing. So you did it not because sexual temptation. You did it because you wanted doing this ensure the fertility of your field and the safety of your wife and children and your family. That's why God said, don't do that. But that's what, and so they have male and female cult prostitutes. The male cult prostitutes were called the dog. That's what it says in the, believe it or not. That's why it says, do not take the wages of a dog into the temple. You say that it's not talking about Fido or Rin Tin Tin. It's talking about the male cult prostitutes. So I'll leave it to your own way to figure out why that particular inscription was there. So, yeah, that's a quick question.
Yahweh is talking about the anointed king.
Yeah.
It was the Messiah. And is that unique to Yahweh, or were the other gods, kings, anointed?
Where's my friend John Walton when I need him? He's an Old Testament scholar. The sense that I have was that all of the kings were made kings through anointing. Now we make kings through crowning. You get the little hat and you put on the person's head, I crown you, and now you're king. In those days, the crowns would be possibly plunder, but you are made a king by anointing. In the very hot and dry climate of the Middle East, you used oil for lots of stuff. The prophets were anointed by it, and kings were anointed by it. So that, in fact, if you can jump back, I got to find it in 1 Samuel. If I can find it without my one little eye. Joshua. When I think it's in chapter 9 of 1 Samuel. Well, okay, verse 10. Sorry, chapter 10. So Saul is going to look for some donkeys that were lost, and he strays far looking for the donkeys, and he comes into the place where Samuel is. And Samuel, being a prophet, knew that he was coming. In chapter 9, verse 15, the day before Saul's coming, Yahweh had revealed this to Samuel, saying, about this time tomorrow I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin, and you shall anoint him to be prince over my people Israel, and he will deliver my people from the hand of the Philistines. For I have regarded my people, because their cry has come to me. So if you jump down ahead a little bit, chapter 10, verse 1. Then Samuel took a flask of oil and poured it on Saul's head and kissed him, which is say, greeted him officially, and said, has not Yahweh anointed you ruler over his inheritance? When you go forth from me today, then you will find 2 men close to Rachel's tomb in the territory of Benjamin at Zelzah. And they will say to you, the donkeys which you went to look for have been found. Now behold, your father has ceased to be concerned about the donkeys. It is anxious about you, saying, what shall I do for my son? And on it goes. So that's what he did also to David after Saul had been rejected from being king. Samuel was set to anoint David. You recall the story that he said David sent him to the house of Jesse, and he said, one of the sons of Jesse, you should anoint king. And so Jesse had all of his sons pass before Samuel, one after another, and whenever he saw the first guy, he was really big guy, and he said, that's got to be the guy. And the Lord said, and no, I said, that's not him. The next guy comes, he says, look at those shoulders. He's great. It's got to be him, not him. So all of the sons passed by them, and Yahweh said, he's not here. And so Samuel said to Jesse, is that it? Do you have any more sons? And he said, well, there's one more, but he's essentially a kid. He's taking care of the sheep. And he said, we won't sit down to eat until he comes. And so David comes in, and Yahweh said to Samuel, this is the one. Arise and anoint him king to be ruler over my people. And so that's how you made a king. Later on, you would have to be accepted by the people. So David was anointed, but Saul didn't accept that, and the people didn't accept that. That would come much later on. When Saul was first anointed, he was anointed by Samuel and made king by Yahweh, but the people still had to accept him. So they had the so-called gathering, the kahal, the ecclesia in the Greek, when all the people gathered together, and they cast lots, which tribe, Benjamin, that sort of stuff, and then they, which family, and then you come by man, and Saul is the one taken. So they had to be acclaimed by the people, and he would be dedicated and chosen by them. But this was to seal God's choice of them. So it wasn't kind of a democratic thing. God chose who he wanted as the king. My guess is that this is this standard practice in the Middle East as well, but I'm guessing a little bit. When you recall when early on when Elijah had some problems I think it's in 1 Kings 18. Let me look. After the contest on Mount Carmel, he skips the country, shrewd move, because Jezebel is waiting to kill him. And he essentially comes to resign, and God says, ain't going to do that. And 1 Kings 19 and verse 15, Yahweh said to Elijah, go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you have arrived, you shall anoint Hazael king over Aram, over Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi you shall anoint king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat you shall anoint as prophet in your place. And it goes on. So it seems some of the stuff wasn't done by him. It was actually done by Elisha later on. But that was the deal. You anoint this person as king. It still would have to be done and confirmed by the usual politics of the thing. But that seemed to be the anointing of kings was God's way of choosing, this is who I want as my king.
And how does the word Messiah become synonymous?
Well, the word Messiah means anointed. So from Messiah means to anoint.
Oh.
So when it talks about in Psalm 18, which gets quoted in our Prokimenon, it ends up saying, God gives great deliverance to his king and shows loving kindness to his Mashiach, to David and to his descendants forever. We say to David and his Christ forever. Whatever. But I mean, that's because the word anointed meant the anointed king. Or it could be the anointed priest. Priests were anointed as well. So you kind of need the context. That's why it says he shows great deliverances, in the plural actually, to his king. So you know that the Mashiach is not the high priest, it's the king. So the anointed was the anointed king. So when I talked about where the king's finally going to be restored, we're under the boot of the Babylonians, then we're under the boot of the Persians, then we're under the boot of the Romans. Is there any end to this? Then the Syrians, then you know that sort of stuff. And then, but we're expecting, we'll get back into this again. Well, we're expecting the king to come, the king, the anointed, the Mashiach. In Greek, the Christos. It comes from the Greek word krio, meaning to anoint. So to David and his Christ, to David and to his anointed, which is his anointed son, his descendant, has Christological significance, as it were, for that. So, but yeah, that's the Mashiach means the anointed one, code for the king. So part of the problem was that why Lord wasn't wild about the title. I chose the Son of Man as an alternate title, is that by the time of Second Temple Judaism in the first century, the word Mashiach or Son of David, had come to have very militaristic connotations. The Mashiach, the king, was the one who needs an army, because kings have armies, or they can't be kings. That's how you stay king, you have an army. So if you're going to say that Jesus of Nazareth is the king, then you're expecting the army to come in, and Rome gets really interested very quickly when someone says, "Oh, I have an army." They say, "Well, you had an army," that sort of stuff. And so that's why he chose a title for himself, the Son of Man, coming from Daniel 7 through the Book of Enoch, that had less militaristic tones to the thing, and then why he said on another occasion, "Why do you say that the son? Why do you call me the son of David? You know, David himself calls him his Lord. So how is he his son? You know, he's not saying that he is not from the house of David. He's saying the militaristic connotations attaching to the word are misplaced. So Psalm 89. I'll finish. What am I doing? So if there's two ways of looking at the fulfillment of the promises that God made. There's the political way and the spiritual or the eschatological way. If you are thinking that when the Messiah came, when the anointed, the Mashiach came, he was going to be a king like David and like Solomon, and would have an army and establish Israel as a political preeminence in the world, then that never happened. You know, it was if you interpret all those promises to say David will have a descendant to reign over the house of Israel forever, then God's promises are gone, because they're not there. They're not likely to have one. Israel, God love them, are unlikely, one hopes, to demolish the Dome of the Rock. That would be politically unwise, I suspect. So, Jerusalem, as the Lord said, will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the end, till the times of the Gentiles were fulfilled. But if the promises that God made to David find a spiritual fulfillment, if the king reigns, but he doesn't reign from Jerusalem, if he reigns from heaven, or as St. Paul would say, from the Jerusalem which is above and which is free, then Jesus is reigning. Jesus is the king. God did keep his promises. the son of the descendant of David is the Mashiach, is the Messiah. He is reigning in heaven, and he will rule over the entire world. He is ruling spiritually now from heaven, and at the second coming, there will be a more less spiritual, more tangible fulfillment of the thing. But if you insist on a political fulfillment, then Psalm 89 says you're toast. God lied. But if you say that God did not lie, he is keeping his promises with a spiritual fulfillment, then God is in fact keeping his covenant. So in one sense, Psalm 89 is the question. Jesus is the answer. That this is the king, as the Lord said, my kingdom is not of this world. So he is not reigning from a little chair in Jerusalem. His throne is at the right hand of God. So I mean that would be, that's what the poignant perplexity couldn't dope out. He says, well, it's great, you promised a political kingdom, where is it? And the answer is, God will bring it, but it will not be a political kingdom. It'll be a kingdom not of this world, that you don't need an army to defend, that you don't need spies to undergird, that you don't need black ops, that you don't need the CIA or any of those other wonderful organizations. You don't need to invade all over the place and drop bombs on people. You don't need to do any of that. The word in Isaiah 2, when the word of the Lord goes out from Jerusalem, they're not political envoys going out from a political capital. They're the apostles bringing the word of salvation out from the church in Jerusalem into all the world. It's a spiritual kingdom rooted in the age to come, not in this age with all of its moral ambiguities. Because if it's all of the kingdoms of this age, if they rise politically, they'll fall politically. The people who are wedded to Hellenism kind of never got over the fall of Constantinople. Oh no, you know. And the thought was, how can you possibly have a church if you don't have an emperor? That was what there's one patriarch of Constantinople said that. I think it was a bishop in Russia. I think it wasn't commemorating him at the liturgy, you know. And he said, well, you gotta commemorate me. You gotta commemorate the emperor. How can you have a church and no emperor? They just take it for granted. In other words, the kingdom was mostly of this world. You know, the kingdom of the Romans and the kingdom of God were sort of kind of coterminous. That's why you need to have an emperor if you got a church. And in the fall of Constantinople in 1453, its transformation into Istanbul proves that, as a matter of fact, you don't need an emperor because the kingdom is not of this world. You would think you would know that after Psalm 89, but there are people that, not everybody gets it. So it is tragically possible to misunderstand the eschatological nature of the church, that it's not of this world, it's rooted in the age to come, and somehow think that the church needs an emperor, that the church needs Byzantium, that the church needs Constantinople, the capital of the world. You know, it doesn't. You know, it needs Jesus sitting at the right hand of God, which is what we have. And in this world, you know, we have no continuing city, even the city of Constantinople, you know. So, please.
I understand, like we were talking about Christ sitting at the right hand of God, and as a New Testament term, is this also true in the Old Testament, specifically while Israel was in exile? Because obviously they didn't have an earthly king, and Jerusalem was destroyed.
Yeah.
So God was the king while Jerusalem was established, and he was there, and he was still ruling, and David was king, and the lineage of David. But as soon as Jerusalem was desecrated, that was kind of all done away with. And then here in Psalm 89, they're writing this question of why have you forsaken us?
Yeah.
Will your reign be established again, kind of
Yeah.
idea?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, my question is more, was the promises of God put on hold for this time that they were in exile, or was Christ still reigning over this period? So that it was never
God was still reigning, but Jesus hadn't come. So Jesus was not reigning at the right hand of God during the exile because he hadn't been born yet, obviously. So God was still reigning, but with Christ, God's reign is renewed. If you want to put it like that, the promises that God made to the house of David would be fulfilled, not in David or Solomon or Rehoboam or any of those, the gang, Hezekiah. They were fulfilled in Jesus. And so when at the ascension, Christ sat at the right hand of God, and the reign of God is established over all of the world in a way that it wasn't before.
Right.
That's what St. Paul means in 1 Corinthians 15, when he said, he must reign until all enemies are put under his feet. The last enemy is death. So Jesus is reigning now. He started reigning at the ascension. My guess is that Israel, after Psalm 89, they kept saying, well, God has made these promises, so where is he? I mean, and you keep waiting and waiting and waiting for the promises to be fulfilled, and what are you going to do? So this was why the promises were that Israel was in exile, and the promise is that when God would bring the Messiah, that everybody would come home. Everybody would come home. What happened after the exile was not the reverse of the exile. Most of them are still in exile. So they were exiled to Babylon and Persia and heaven knows where, because I have a slave and you sell him and that guy sells him, and so they're all over the place. That was the Jewish diaspora. That was the Jewish dispersion. So it was understood that most of the guys didn't come home. Just a few hardy, crazy people came home to settle around Jerusalem and build a temple after a lot of nagging from Haggai and Zechariah and Malachi. But the land was mostly just Judea. So they were mostly just Judeans. I mean, they're from all 12 tribes, so it was just settling in the land of Judea, which is why later they're called not Israelites, but Jews, because they were in Judea. So they're waiting for all the other Israelites from the dispersion to come back. And so that didn't happen. So they're still, so they figured, okay, when the Messiah comes, everyone will come back from the dispersion to the promised land. That's what God promised. That's what the prophets promised. That's what's going to happen. But they were still kind of waiting for that. And that's why Jerusalem fell, because they figured, look, we can't, we're coming back. Things are starting to slowly go our way. We've rebuilt the temple. Herod's given us a really nice one. When the Messiah comes, the temple will be established. All these promises will be fulfilled again, and it'll be wonderful. So, but the temple can't go. We just got the temple back. Well, just from 520, but I mean, sort of just got it back. So that's why when the Romans were besieging them, instead of saying, look, we're toast, like we're not going to hold out against the Roman Empire, they hung in there. They say, the temple cannot fall. God will defend us no matter what. Even at the last minute, there'll be a battalion of angels or something. But God would not let the temple fall. It was inconceivable that God would allow the temple to be destroyed. That's why when our Lord, in the Olivet Discourse, the apostles were saying, Master, look at these wonderful buildings. And he said, impressed are you? Eventually not one stone will be left upon another that will not be torn down. And they thought, like at the end of the world. They said, what's the sign of this and of the end of the age? Because they figured the temple can't fall until the world ends. But the Lord said, it will fall within one generation, and it will not be the end of the world. So, but that's why they hung in there, defending Jerusalem, holding out of the siege essentially to the last man, because they thought that God will send the rescue. God did not send the rescue, because God's wrath had come upon them because they had rejected the Messiah, allowed him to be crucified, and resisted the gospel for a generation. And they thought, okay, well then, this is God's judgment on you for that. Yes.
Well, I don't quite get it. When you say like the reign is like renewed when Christ ascended to the right hand of the Father, I don't really get it, because like I thought like the Holy Trinity is always the same, right? Like it's eternally unchanging. So how, like, let's say Holy Trinity, let's say this is God and like this is timeline, and like it's like not on the timeline, right? But how can like up here, like Christ ascend up here and change, like I don't know
Well,
how to
one
say
of the
it.
one of the things that happened to dramatically change things was the incarnation. So God was always Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but at the incarnation, the Word of God, the second person of the Holy Trinity, united human nature to Himself in the womb of a Jewish teenager. That's why her icon's all over the place, and so that's a change, not in God's ontological thing. Without changing, Christ united human nature to Himself in the womb of the Virgin, but that's a change. Before God united human nature to Himself, He didn't unite human nature to Himself. So that's a change. Not in God's ontology. He's still God, but He's also now God and man.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a change. That is something to do with why, as some of the fathers would say, that's why we venerate icons. Because before, God was invisible God who had no image. Now God has an image. Looks like a Jew because He is one. So that's why. So if God didn't have a body, then you can't say that He has a body. If God now has a body, then you can paint His body. You can take a little cell phone camera out and say, click, and there's this picture of Jesus of Nazareth. This is an image of God Almighty, because it is. So that's a change. Any
Wait, one foolish question.
Yeah.
A foolish one. So, if you take a picture of Jesus, like let's say you can travel back in time, and like you take a picture and it's an icon, you go back to the time where He wasn't born. Would that still be valid, or
sorry, what?
like is it still venerable? Because like at like let's say 80, like before Jesus is born, let's say you can travel back in time, you get a photo of Jesus in like let's say 30 something 80, you travel back in time to like some area, like the time where Jesus wasn't born, you venerate that icon, but like that person doesn't exist yet. But would that still be valid, or
I suspect that when you get in your time machine and go back, the icon probably doesn't go back with you. That would be my guess. At least in the type of time machines that I'm used to traveling in, that's generally how they work.
Very fun hypothetical.
Yes. Yeah. Please.
Father, I'm curious around when David is established and there's all the tribes and they're saying, God is saying, this is what I want you to do. When they started rebelling or going against His directives, was it collectively across all the tribes, or was it primarily led by David, who influenced the tribes, who then, or did the people all start rebelling all at the same time? I'm curious how
the rebellion spread. Yeah. So from what we can figure out from First and Second Samuel is that David was pretty good at. He was first Judah was his main tribe, and then the others signed on.
Right.
And then he was good at fighting battles. He had made alliances and stuff like that. Took out a lot of the Moabites in the Valley of Salt and stuff like this. And as long as he was winning battles and stuff, everything was cool. There were problems from within his own family because of the unfortunate Bathsheba incident. Then there were problems afterwards. There was Absalom rebelled and stuff like this.
Right.
And then Solomon was established on the throne, and then Solomon taxed the people essentially a lot. He bled them white, actually. They were forced corvées of labor. Like, you got to build a temple, you got to build the palaces and stuff. He ain't doing that himself. He's taking essentially guys who could do so, and so that all takes money, and so they were taxed enough, and he was kind of riding roughshod over some of the tribalism. So when you read some of the Old Testament stuff, he had 12 areas to provide for him. You provide the food for 1 month, and you provide food for the second month. But it was in these 12 administrative units, not the 12 tribes. So he was running roughshod over the tribal structure a little bit. So, okay. And then after he dies, there's, of course, a delegation to go to his successor, Rehoboam, who says, that he said essentially, could you give us a break, please? Like, less taxes, And he said, let me think about that. So he goes and checks with the old guys, and the old guys say, give them what they want, and they'll love you forever. The new guys, the punks, said essentially, if they smell weakness, they'll be like blood in the water, that sort of stuff. And so so you got to be strong. And so when he comes back, he says to them, my finger is thicker than my father's loins. What he meant by the finger, scholars debate about, if you know what I mean. But anyway, that's what he said. And he said, my father disciplined you with whips, I will discipline you with scorpions. You ain't seen nothing yet. Okay then. So that, wrong answer. So that's why they blew the trumpet and they said, okay, we're out of here. David, look after your own house. We're gone. And then so God said, I will find a leader. Found Jeroboam. And Jeroboam messed up and became an idolater. That was not good. But anyway, that's when you had the northern and the southern kingdom. So the northern kingdom started to get into idolatry because they thought, if we have all of our northern kingdom guys going down to the temple in the southern kingdom, we'll lose their loyalty. So we can have a temple or a shrine or two up here in the north. Except that you can't do that because God said only where the ark is. They said, so you can't do that. They said to God, watch me. So that's why. So they kind of went into idolatry. And north and south, there was the oppression of the poor and the dispossessed and the helpless. Like say the rich get richer and the poor get children, sort of thing. That was their story all the way there. So it was the defections happened at greater or lesser times, and the prophets north and south were telling the people, because the idolatry was in the north and the south. After the death of David and Solomon, and the scriptures are quite clear. Solomon messed up because he had all of these wives. The reason he had the wives wasn't because he was that way, but because a lot of them were economic treaties. You make an economic treaty with this king or the sheik, and the guarantee is that I'll marry your daughter. She's part of my harem. You may or may not have date night on Thursday night, but the point is that it's an economic thing, and so but he also provided if they worshipped another god, he said, oh, it's okay, honey, I'll find a little chapel for you to worship your foreign gods in Jerusalem. So that's why the scriptural writer said they turned Solomon's heart away from following God to allowing all of those shrines. So then it was all downhill when the prophet said, cut that out. He said, shut up. We're gonna. Or in the more elegant words, God said, you turn your back to me, not my face. So,
thank you.
Please.
This might be a really simple question, but did the Israelites bring the ark with them to Babylon, and then when they had the pilgrimage feast, they went to where the ark was in Babylon still? That's
no, it was the ark was destroyed and lost during the Babylonian.
So then, if they could only sacrifice where the ark was under the Torah, then how were the people supposed to uphold the law?
Well, that's that's a very good point. So it seems as if by then, God, it seems, first of all, when they were in Babylon, you can't offer sacrifice. There's no priest, there's no nothing. But that's when the first thing they did was to build the temple, because it seemed to be God had said, I will take sacrifices in the temple, even though the ark's gone. And significantly, one of the prophets says the ark will never be rebuilt. It will not come to your mind. So it seemed to be as if they said, as long as you have an altar and a temple in Jerusalem, sacrifices can be offered upon the altar. But when you went into the Holy of Holies, where the ark was supposed to be, there's nothing there. But they still had the altar of incense in there, and they still had the altar for sacrifices outside in the courtyard. So the idea seems to be that the ark's gone; it was destroyed. I mean, there's gold on it, so that ain't going to last the Babylonians coming in. The Ethiopian idea was that the ark was taken down. Solomon had an alliance with the Queen of Sheba or something like this, and the ark was taken down there. No, this is stupidity. This is no. The ark was there until the Babylonians came in there and saw that there's gold on it, and that took care of that. So it was destroyed. Indiana Jones is not going to find the ark. It's gone. So, but you can still offer sacrifices in Jerusalem. And in fact, there was a Roman chap by the name of Pompey the Great. In 60, Rome conquered Jerusalem, and he came in 63 BC, much to the horror of the Jews, into their temple, into the Holy of Holies, because he thought, well, I want to see what's there. And I can't because I got the army, I won, you lost, I'm going to do this. So he goes into the Holy of Holies to find the statue. And he said, there's nothing here. It's an empty room. What's going on? He registered his shock at this. But if you don't have the ark, the understanding was that God will have to tell you to rebuild it. And if God doesn't tell you to rebuild it, I mean, they had, for example, during the profanation of the place under Antiochus Epiphanes in 168 BC-ish. There were some things that were profaned, and they weren't sure what to do with them. They said, well, keep them to one side and until a prophet comes and tells us what to do. Prophet never did come. But I mean, but that was the idea. A prophet has to tell us what to do. Should we rebuild the ark? What do you want us to do? So, but until God tells you that, then you don't kind of do anything. But you can't offer sacrifices. So they did until they lost the temple.
Kind of like a side tangent question off that is, I don't remember who or what the exact story is, but the reference where the ark is falling, the guy touches it to support it, and he
yes, that was
why did that not happen to Babylonians trying to, or why was the ark not preserved by God?
That's right. The chap's name was Huzzah, and David was kind of bringing the ark on an ox cart from where he got it in Shiloh to his hometown, and. First of all, you're not supposed to bring it on an ox cart, just for starters. The Levites are supposed to bring it on the poles. And so if it's not going to fall, if the Levites are carrying it on the poles, because it's on the poles. If it's on an ox cart, it could tip, but don't put it on an ox cart. So Huzzah reached out there to steady it, and because the whole thing was a violation of what God said, God struck him down and he died. So there it stays, and David's afraid to bring it into the city of David. Shrewd move. But then God blesses the house of, I think it was Abinadab, where it was, and so God said, so David thought, oh, it's safe to bring it to Jerusalem. If you bless the house of Abinadab, you can bless the house of David. So he brought it in. But it seemed as if God did not strike down the Babylonians because God had said to the Babylonians, go and take them out. For their idolatry, the temple's going down, Jerusalem's going down, the ark's going down, everybody there from the king down is going down. So I suspect that's why it was part of the judgment of God.
And I think God destroying the ark was part of him preparing them to be like that my kingdom is not an earthly.
Yeah, God was essentially saying, if you obey me, if you disobey me, you're toast. And so in Jeremiah, I think Jeremiah 7, I got to look. Israel kept saying, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. As long as we're the temple of the Lord, we're okay. And Jeremiah's point was that you're not okay. If you disobey God, you're not okay. It doesn't matter whether you're the temple of the Lord or the ark or anything else. God will judge you. He said that he would in the Mosaic covenant, and he will. I mean, but they didn't believe me. They said, no, how can God possibly? Jerusalem is inviolable. Jerusalem cannot fall. They're slow learners. But that's why they kept holding out.
Okay.
Oh, bless your heart. Well, my apologies. Bless your heart. Thank you so much for being here.